Okay, Assalamualaikum and very good morning to our beloved lecturer, Dr. Raza, and my fellow classmates. I hope you are in good health and stay safe wherever you are. Then let me introduce myself. My name is Nur Atiqah, and today I will present about my article review, which is the topic is consumption and the environment. And this article wrote by Jonathan Harris. Okay, so the introduction of this topic, which is the environmental effects of the global expansion of the customer demands through the usage of the energy and the accumulation of environmental waste are overwhelming, which is the terms we can find the terms of amount, product and services purchased, and the theory of the efficiencies maximization is particularly concerned. It's about how to manage and demand between the specific alternative and the alternatives available in market. And this article also let us understand the rise of the consumer consumption in the modern world, which is they are provide a lot of example to make it easier to us to understand the article itself. And it also state the difference between the socially focused criticism of the philosophy of consumption in the ecologically based study of the effect of consumer consumption on the natural environment. Next, in this article, it was divided to 7 parts of divided to 7 parts, which is the first is the allocation and distribution of resources, which is and this what can I relate in these summaries is it's arguing that individual hold inherently in contradictory views of questions of consumption and the environment, and that policy debates cannot be confined to the economy's familiar framework and equity versus efficiency considerations, and that we cannot put the price on things such as the natural environment that we value the most. And then for the next chapter is market and non-market determinants of private consumption and their impacts of the environment, which is consumption is an activity to combine the market and non-market elements, right? Then the environment impacts and consumption depends on not only the physical requirements of market production, but also the social and institutional frameworks that determine the boundary between market and non-market aspects of consumption. Then the environment degradation result from the bias of the consumption process toward the predominance of market relations and access the paid labor industries. So industrial societies was argued in this part. And then for the next is consumption, value added, physical transformation and welfare, which is the economic theory typically neglects the importance of the natural resources of the production and consumption. Then that might be some argues that the economy has exceeded the optimum scale relative to the carrying capacity of natural ecosystem, and the resources constraints on the consumption will be increasingly binding. But the resource consumption is inherently limited, and the extent of the Earth's ecosystem has a limit that fast approaching. Then for the overall total consumption, which is the product population per capita consumption, can be limited of the reduces by uh, controlling either this factor. Okay. Next is creating the affluent society, which is in the last 2 centuries, a sizable minority of the world population has been achieved as a standard living that would have been unimaginable of previous generations. This in this improvement has been obtained at the price at the vast increase in the consumption of the energy resources in the raw materials, widespread population from industry, and a variety of social problems. And therefore, it raised question equity regarding the distribution of wealth both within individual countries and between the industrialized world in the third world. Then and this the history of the emerge of the affluent society and examines the environmental and social implication of the unprecedented level of resource use. And then for the next session in chapter is natural resource consumption, which is global consumption of the natural resource has reached unsustainable level, yet majority of the world population remains impoverished and require additional resources for future development, which is a recent trend in the natural resource use. The associated environmental impacts in an international context and contrast resources used in the United States and India. And next is the environmental cost of consumption, which is the high consumption level of the global upper income, which is the consumer class, account for a vastly proportionate share of worldwide environmental impacts. So the environmental sequences of consumer class resource use the considers the implication of the nature growth of lower and middle income living standard. And the last part is creating sustainable material economy, which is current pattern of consumption in industrial countries involve unsustainable level of virgin of raw material use. So the requirement of prospect of transition to sustainable economy based on the reduce use, reuse, and recycling of material, which is they are practicing for recycling part. So about this chapter, about this article, which is every single part of this article was state a very clearly example and explanation regarding to the topic itself. So the theoretical viewpoints, it's easy to understand and it's very simple to understand. um, every part have their own references and their own perspective and example also. So then every topic also related to the main topic is which is the consumption and environment. the environment. So the conclusion is overall it's a good, well-written article with an important message and conclusion such as environmental friendly innovation be of will be of course extremely important. Then the strengths that influence market to over increasing level the consumption to be themed, and if the then the conflict between consumer desires of biophysical realities is over to be resolved, and greater intake for product would be change in favor of the accomplishment of the society and culture. And lastly is the internal change of goal is a big challenge to this part. And then that's all for my presentation. Thank you for listening and pay attention to the presentation. So thank you and assalamualaikum.